Hello and welcome to another episode of Atomic Vinyl Reviews. And today I'm going to be doing a sort of little overview, sort of my little review and thoughts on the Ultraman anime that has recently come out on Netflix. So I'm gonna start off by saying I've actually never really watched any Ultraman, like the original TV show or any of the other movies or any of that stuff. So I went into this not really knowing much. I've seen a few clips here and there. I know a few Ultraman kaiju. I was kind of hoping that Jiras would show up. For those of you who don't know, that's basically the Godzilla, one of the 60s or 70s Godzilla suits where they just put like a frill on it and called it Jiras. Because Ultraman was made by Toho. It was made by a lot of the same people who made the Godzilla movies. I think Tsuburaya, the special effects director on most of the Showa Godzilla movies, did a lot of work, or at least his team did, on Ultraman. So it was, it's something that I've always wanted to get into and watch because I really like that Japanese sort of tokusatsu style stuff. And recently we had the Netflix Godzilla anime, so that was kind of done in a similar style. So that I did watch that, and that kind of gave me sort of a loose bar to set this up to. And yeah, so last night I opened it up and I watched the whole thing. It's only, I think, one season, and you can pretty much watch it no problem in a night if you're happy to just binge watch your way through it in a couple of hours. And since it's made for Netflix, it flows really well one episode through the other. So the basic premise of this one, I'm gonna try to avoid spoilers. I'm just gonna not really touch on the ins and outs of the plot. But the basic premise is that we're following the son of Ultraman and his sort of journey trying to fit into his father's role, because he kind of he has Ultraman powers, sort of super strength and that sort of ability. And he's the protagonist of this film. We also do get the old Ultraman as an old dude who doesn't really do much. We get like this sort of secret agency called the Science Agency, or some sort of name with the word science in it, that basically is sort of like the underground um, kind of secret Men in Black type agency that has all this Ultraman stuff going on. And this is set, in the future, obviously, it's a continuation of the original Ultraman TV show, I believe. So I don't know what other continuations this goes in, because there were a couple of other variants of Ultraman that happened over time, but I'm pretty sure this one is a continuation of the OG Ultraman TV show. So the one that had this guy. So this is like my only Ultraman figure. It's this little bootleg Lego type one I did a little review of a little while ago. And I have Jet Jaguar because he's basically an Ultraman ripoff, but I love him to death. So we got Jet Jaguar here and a little Ultraman kaiju. Overall, sort of my thoughts about this anime is it's actually really good. I enjoyed pretty much the whole thing. It's not perfect by any means, but compared, say, to the Godzilla anime, it's probably a lot more enjoyable, has really good action, and is pretty interesting. There's a lot of sort of subtle stuff going on in the plot, and this is coming from somebody who actually liked the Godzilla anime quite a bit, because a lot of people really didn't like the Godzilla anime, and I still need to do my comprehensive review of the whole series, because I have like little mini reviews of each individual sort of part of it, so my initial reaction to it, but I don't feel that really gives a full idea of how I sort of feel about it now. But yeah, I really liked this Ultraman anime. It was a pretty well done one. Again, this one was done in that CGI anime style, and sometimes it really shows and it feels a little awkward. But especially as the series went on, I feel like the animation got even better. The movements were very fluid most of the time, apart from some of the background characters' faces, which just looked really robotic in a couple of scenes, which was a little funny. But overall, they did a really great job it was actually this kind of weird combination where if you watch it for long enough, you stop realizing that it's like in an anime style or even in an animated style. Some like shots look almost live action, whereas others look completely 2D anime, especially their faces, and then others look a little bit CGI. It's like a little bit weird, but very enjoyable, and I feel like they did a better job than they did with the Godzilla anime. Probably the main reason being is the color palette they chose in this one, although it was sort of a little bit overexposed and stylized. It wasn't really as harsh looking as it was in the Godzilla anime. It was a little bit more naturalistic, some more colors and warm tones in there, which is really great to see, so I like that. The action in here was pretty cool. They had a lot of fight scenes, a lot of really cool choreographed stuff. So if you're after that stuff, you're definitely going to get a lot of it here. My sort of, I don't know whether this is a complaint or not, because I don't like to be one of those people who are just like, oh, they made it different, so it's bad. But because that was sort of a thing that most people had an issue with the Godzilla anime. They didn't like that it took a different direction and didn't have the classic Godzilla type action in there, and instead went for a more sort of psychological, sort of metaphysical type story with what was going on. And yeah, but I actually really liked that in the Godzilla anime. But with this, they sort of did that again, where they didn't have a whole lot of what we'd call sort of classic Ultraman action. For starters, Ultraman isn't kaiju sized in this. He doesn't grow really big. Because I think it's explained that whatever force, whatever alien light creature made the original Ultraman be able to do that, sort of finished its work and then flew off back into space and then left. The original Ultraman is just basically sort of like a super strong human type character who wears more like a mech suit, and just left with those sort of powers, and his son sort of adopted those powers, but he, you know, doesn't grow big in this at all. Which is, I was really wanting to see that. He does have a sort of plethora of his own sort of superpowers, but he feels overall more like Iron Man, I guess, in this than what I would typically think Ultraman would be. Granted, I haven't watched the original series, I've only seen clips of it here and there. So what am I, like, I don't have a full perspective to really judge this. But going into this, I would say if you are familiar with the original series, you're probably going to get a lot of the in-jokes and little references here and there, because there's a lot of them, from what I gather. And the very first episode or two would really help if you knew that background. After that, it's pretty self-explanatory, I think. So that element of it, like, they kind of have, like, what is like a kaiju fight, but it's on a small scale. They have a lot of sort of tokusatsu fights with people that generally that are aliens. They're very humanoid though. Which I like a lot of the aliens in this, and I'm gonna get to that in a second. But you know, they have similar sort of designs to the Ultraman-y type kaiju alien creatures, which is really cool. And they have at least one battle with one that looks like a proper kaiju, which I really enjoyed. And they kind of tried and make it seem really big, but it's nowhere near an actual sort of proper kaiju size. And it is in this universe canon that those fights did happen and that the original Ultraman did get big. So yeah, you know, don't let that ruin the experience for you, because it is actually a really entertaining anime. It does feel a little bit more, like I said, like Ultraman, or maybe a bit more like Kamen Rider, or some of those other tokusatsu shows that they had where they didn't actually grow big, and they just sort of had weird suits. Especially since the design of the Ultraman suits in this, and kind of spoiler, there are more than one that come up, but I'm not going to get into that any more than that. But the designs of them don't look as much like the Ultraman one that was in the first one, and they look a little bit more like something like Kamen Rider, or like I said, Iron Man, or just a generic sort of mech suit that you see in another thing. They kind of make it overly complicated and a little bit uh, just that sort of typical sort of modern anime style, which I'm a little less fond of because I was really hoping just to see at least one sort of proper scene where we get the classic Ultraman suit in action, and we get some flashbacks, but they're really short and they don't really give that sort of full look at it that you'd sort of hope for. Um, Nonetheless, getting back to the anime itself, character-wise, I think it was pretty good. It focuses on sort of as a lot of the plot development happens around sort of coincidences and what's it called? You know, when somebody just pulls out like a winning move out of their ass that they can turns out they can do at the last minute. There was a word for that, but I forgot what it is. Deo ex machina or something like that. I don't know. So sometimes that comes up, but with the drama in it and the music in it's pretty good. It's really like sort of gives you that same sort of hype that you feel like something at a Pacific Rim. The main sort of theme in it, not the one that goes down to the credits. They have like a J rock pop type song that plays at the end credits. But it's like during the really hyped sort of battle scenes, they have some great music that reminds me a lot of the Pacific Rim theme, which I really like. So that helps to add to the drama. Sorry I'm being a little scattered. I always am with these things because I like to do them unscripted, unfortunately. So sorry, um, but yeah, the action's pretty good. The characters, like I said, they're pretty simple, but a lot of them are enjoyable. I watched the dub version because I can't be bothered reading. It would be cool to see the sub version because I usually like them. The Japanese audio better, but they did a really good job with the English dubbing on this one. Um, Most of the characters are pretty interesting. There's like just to run them off. There's the main guy, who's the son of Ultraman. He's actually he's not the worst protagonist actually. He's got some depth to him in his background. He doesn't have a whole plethora of sort of emotion to him as much as I would like, but compared to some modern anime protagonists, he actually has a bit more depth to him. Probably has a little bit more than Haruo from the Godzilla anime, even though I did like Haruo. He was kind of funny, especially in the English dub, but that's not a whole other thing. So he was alright, not the best. Probably my favorite character in this was this the science division agency, whatever it's called. One of the guys who runs it is an alien. So the whole kind of premise is they're sort of aliens living undercover on Earth in their own sort of like designated slums, and there's like some drama because of that as well. And sort of most people don't know about it. But one of the apparently they were the antagonists of the original Ultraman series, and he's like the last of their kind, is now working for the good guys as one of the main characters. And he's got this like sort of weird tube, sort of looks like a chewed up cigar head with like one googly eye in the middle, like a little funnel at the top of his head, and just this big bulky tall body in like a fancy suit, and he's got this really slow sort of deep voice like this, and it's just really funny. I love that character because he's just so weird and just such a sort of classic sort of Toho kaiju type weird alien design that I love it. And in the like weird suit, the sort of humanoid body in the weird suit with just this bizarre head really reminds me, if you guys have seen the movies or read the manga, 20th Century Boys, there's Tomodachi, or known as Friend, is like the antagonist of that series, where he like wears a suit and has like a wrapped up face with like a symbol with a big eye, as his sort of look, and it really reminded me of, especially the way he talked as well, of that guy. So I really love that guy. There's also the other guy from that agency who runs it, who just, you never really know what's going through his mind, and he's kind of an interesting character. It's just it always feels like there's something else sort of going on under the surface with everyone's sort of motivation, which is really interesting in this. There's also, of course, the old Ultraman, He's pretty cool, but he doesn't really do much, unfortunately, like apart from at the very beginning. There is also this other guy, who's like, how to describe him? He's like this other guy who wears glasses and he's like really strict and serious at this agency, and he's kind of like he's kind of frenemies, if that makes sense, with our main young Ultraman character, and he's kind of his personality is kind of similar to Asuka from Evangelion, where he's like really up himself and really kind of displeased with everyone around him and sort of wants to show off that he's the best. He's a little bit less flamboyant than Asuka. And there's also this other kid that shows up later, which I won't get into for spoiler reasons. Um, and there's this pop star 15-year-old girl. I know they don't actually give out the ages of any of the characters really, but she just looks like she's a child that's sort of the love interest of our main character, and she kind of always ends up in situations where he has to save her, even though like it's so random that it's always her. And she's kind of interesting because she's got a bit of a backstory, but with Ultraman, the original Ultraman, and her some tragic backstory with her family. Um, and but it's kind of funny because even though we kind of find out that even though she puts on a front of loving Ultraman, she hates Ultraman, but then it turns out she's kind of fascinated by him. But when she actually sees him in person, just by the look in her eyes, she's kind of horny for him, even when she still has the grudge for him, which is really weird. But I don't know, just watch it, it'll make sense. You'll see what I mean. So and there's a group of police officers who are trying to uncover this whole conspiracy, and they're all interrelated to the other characters in certain ways. And um, yeah, the story is actually pretty good. Like they actually put effort into it, and there's some interesting character relations in there, and the drama is done well enough that even though a lot of the plot's elements seem a little contrived in some instances, it kind of works, I think, and you don't really notice that too much. So I'm gonna give it a good thumbs up for the story and the characters. They're nothing super duper like special. They're not like what's it called, Cowboy Bebop or Evangelion. Nowhere near that sort of kind of memorable characters, but they're definitely enjoyable and sort of fleshed out just enough that they remain a step above most sort of typical modern anime characters, which is great. And one of my favorite things about this anime is they don't hold back on the gore. Now, it's not like super duper gory, but if you think about the Godzilla anime, the goriest thing that happens there is somebody shoots themselves in the head and you see a splatter of blood on the wall. This one has a lot more than that. It has, you know, blood showing. It's got people dissolving into blood puddles on the wall. It's got people being stabbed through the body and people dying, and it's even got some swear words in there. No one actually says them, but like in some of the translations of things that are written, we do have the F word show up once or twice in there in an episode or two. So that's pretty cool. I like that sort of aspect to it. Which part of me thinks that if Subaraya were still alive today, he'd be a bit upset because he was not a fan of gore in his tokusatsu films because he always wanted them to be for the children. And you know, as much as I love Subaraya, I really love it when they actually push that in some of these movies. Like if you think about the Gamera trilogy, the 90s trilogy for example, that had a lot of pretty sort of messed up kaiju gore and crazy shit going on, and it's one of the best tokusatsu kaiju series out there. And as much as I love those Showa films that were very kid friendly, I think they were really goofy and fun. I think if you can combine some of those goofy elements, like the weird monster designs and some of just the silly things that happen in this series, with some sort of more hard-edged sort of stuff like that, especially keeping the drama high, it's really good. And just like I was saying with the animation's really good. But you know, it sort of varies. At the beginning, like I feel like the longer it went on, the better they went in both the writing and the animation. And the cinematography, they definitely made it feel really cinematic in this series, which is great. Really good lighting in scenes, really dynamic angles. So thumbs up there. Um, and that's about what I can get into without getting too much into any spoilers, but just my overall thoughts about this series is if you are sort of a fan of your tokusatsu stuff, kaiju stuff, and you're thinking about getting into Ultraman and stuff like that, or if you just like your anime, I would actually say this one is above average and worth your time. It's a really easy watch. I would give it maybe like 3 or 4 episodes before it really starts to get going. Yeah, just give it a shot. It kind of like bear in mind, I feel like they need to keep going into this because it kind of ends and you're still left with a lot of questions. There's a lot of things unanswered, so don't expect everything to come together. But it leaves it interesting, and I highly recommend checking it out. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on the Ultraman anime. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Actually, I'm really interested in hearing about, what you think, especially if you have watched the original Toho series, sort of back in the 60s or whatever. You don't always have to have watched them back in the 60s, but just, I mean, if you've watched those and seeing this now, what are your thoughts of this Ultraman anime? Um, like I said, I don't think it's perfect. I think some elements they could have made a little bit more interesting, but with going in not really knowing much, I was pleasantly surprised. And I think you guys will be too. So, yeah, without further ado, may all your vinyl be a radiated vinyl. Over and out.